mean? They were rampaging along, won their first 2 games. They've lost their last 2, but they could have probably won both of them.
A fantastic looking facility there in the deep south.
I'm sure they're going to come out firing tonight.
From memory, he was leading last week. Are you going to be leading this week, or?
From bottom with 6 points and second from bottom with 5. Yes and no. Yes and no. It paid off for them. They got a 2, double the 4 and won 6 points. Depends what the teams above you do, doesn't it?
Unbiased. Miles Davis.
Welcome to another episode of Unbiased with Miles Davis, where we find out the stories behind the game of lawn bowls in New Zealand. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Graham Dorreen, coach extraordinaire. Graham, we always start right at the beginning. Where were you born and where were you brought up?
Well, I was born in Auckland, but when I was 3 months old, my parents relocated to Hamilton. So I was very much a Waikato man until I was 12. And then my parents relocated back to Auckland. And since then, I've been in Auckland.
Right, okay. So Hamilton, I've lived in both of those lovely cities. Now, if we go back to Hamilton, presumably you did your primary school in Hamilton. Do you remember much about that? What school did you go to?
I do. I was at Forest Lake Primary, and then I went to Myra Intermediate, and both those schools were excellent schools. It was honestly just a great environment, and no, it's just a really, really treasured part of my life. Really, it was fantastic.
And what were your parents doing, Graham, in terms of their occupations?
My father there was a company called National Electric in those days, NEECO, N-E-E-C-O, and he was the regional manager in Hamilton for those 12 years before he got, he was sent back to Auckland as the assistant manager in Auckland, and that's when we came back when I was 12. My mother was a traditional mum, stayed at home and looked after the kids and did all those things.
How many of you were there?
Well, there's 4 of us. My brother, he died when he was 33. So I've got 2 sisters, one's 3 years younger and one's 8 years younger.
That's awful. That must have been a real shock and a sort of horrible burden to bear for the family.
Well, it was a tragedy, really, because my brother had lost his son a year earlier at a cot death, and it was very stressful for him. He was an asthmatic when he was younger, and I think the stress just got to him when it came up to virtually the anniversary of his son Jason's death, and he had a heart attack and died at 33.
That's awful, Graham. That's awful.
Nice.
No, I can imagine that for your parents it would have been even worse. Nothing like losing a child. No. We'll try and move on to happier things. I mean, life's full of all these sort of different things.
Of course.
So you moved up to Auckland. Where do you go to college in Auckland?
Well, I went to the timing was perfect. My parents shifted when basically I had a month to go at what was Form 2 level. So we shifted up in the September of my Form 2 year. So I went for a month at Northcote Intermediate, and then I started Westlake Boys High School the following February. So and that was a great school to be at, fantastic school. So
I'm going to have a bit of rivalry there. I had 3 of my sons go through Rosmini, so
right.
there could be a bit of friction for the rest of this conversation. But it is a great school, so you're very lucky to be able to move up and go to school. And what sort of student were you? Academically, were you strong, Graham?
I was steady. I was like, a good example would be my school C days. I think from memory, I got 60 in every subject and 59 in one. So I was always on the basis C's get degrees. It was not too much work. I spent too much time playing sport. My whole life, all I ever wanted to be honest, I wanted to go to phys ed school at Dunedin and I could only see myself being a phys ed instructor at a secondary school. That was what my passion was, which didn't actually eventuate, but that was my whole focus. So sport was probably the key thing at school. And
right, what sports, Graham? What ones did you really enjoy? Did you get really stuck into?
I did athletics, but I played rugby and cricket. They were the big ones. So, and I went quite deep in those sectors. So it was good. Yeah, so I played in the first 11 cricket. and first 15 rugby. I think I was vice captain of both of those in the last year at school. So no, that was good. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, right. So when we're talking rugby, what position were you playing?
First 5'8".
I had you at the first 5'8". I could just see you there sort of marshalling the troops. What about cricket? You a bit of an all-rounder?
I was an opening batsman, yep, and a wicket-keeper, but primarily an opening batsman. I was pretty slow. I was probably in the Mark Richardson mould. I hated getting out. So I didn't have a huge array of attacking shots, but I absolutely loved just being there. I just loved playing cricket. It was awesome.
Yeah, it is a magnificent game, and unfortunately, I think in the modern era, Graham, there's not enough people like yourself who want to spend time at the crease.
Yeah, well, it was just the way it was. We had a brilliant coach too, so he was actually very advanced. When you look at coaching in those days, he would sit down with you and say, your role is to anchor the innings. Just that's it. I don't care how many runs you score, but I don't want to see you for an hour and a half. And that was my role. Where the other guy, chap Tim Gardner, his role was to smoke the ball around. So no, you learn a lot from those things, you know.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And it's great to see, all these years later that a coach there and a teacher has still got that influence on you, which I think is magnificent. Now, you're coming up to leave school. What do you do? You said you wanted to go to university. Did you end up going to university?
For 1 week. Yeah, so I was like not very popular with my parents. had a good schooling. I'd been a prefect for 2 years. I didn't go to university. The reason I didn't go to university at Otago was quite simply my parents couldn't afford it, and I didn't realise that at the time because it had never been discussed. So I then enrolled at Auckland University, where you did the reverse. Instead of a degree in phys ed supported by a Bachelor of Arts degree, you did the arts degree and a diploma in phys ed. But on day one, I didn't have my head around that. I wanted to be the master at the other way around. So after a week, I said to my parents, that's not for me. So I dropped out. So,
oh dearie me, that doesn't sound like you, Graham. But at least you're making the choice for your future, aren't you?
Well, I was pretty sure I didn't want to do that. So I didn't actually know a lot. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after that. Probably my thinking was I would work for a year and then save up enough money to go to university in Dunedin. But what actually happened was I ended up working at Farmers Trading Company. It's a long story how I got to do that, but it was I ended up working. The family that lived next door to us in Mairangi Bay, chap Mr. Hooton, was the chief accountant there, and I was probably 18 or 19, and he was probably 37, 38, so he's quite a young person to be the chief accountant at Farmers, but we used to play a bit of social cricket together, and he basically said to me, look, you've dropped out, why don't you come to Farmers, there's plenty of jobs, and you'll get some income. And I remember saying to him that was not sort of like in my plan, but at the end of the day, it was some money. And I went there for the first 6 weeks were interesting. I got taken up to what you would call a HR manager, a woman, Miss Hopley, and she said, we don't get people with, basically, you weren't getting a lot of people with an education going there. It just didn't happen, or a sound education. So they had this little academy scheme where I had a week at 6 different areas, a week in the menswear, a week in the womenswear, a week in the branch department, a week in the dispatch, a week. And then at the end of 6 weeks, I was given a week off on full pay and asked to write about my experience in those 6 weeks, which I did. Then I came back and got I was actually asked where I'd like to work in those areas. And I remember saying I was quite happy to work anywhere because, respectfully, it wasn't going to be a long-term career. But there was a chap, Ron Bennett, who ran the menswear, and all the buying for the 80 stores was done out of Hobson Street. So there was 7 or 8 buyers on the menswear. And they each had, as I say, they were buying for these 80-odd stores. So I got to work there with the boyswear buyer. So that meant going out and looking at ranges and lunches out and trip to Australia and a few things like that. So I ended up working there for 2.5 years and was appointed actually the youngest ever buyer at 21, and I was earning good money then, and I had an idea that maybe one day I would like to own a chain of retail stores, because I knew the next step up was to be from a buyer was like the sales manager, and all the buyers in those days were in their 40s. So I'm thinking there's not a huge, and the sales manager was like 60. So I didn't sort of see a big pathway there, because you're always wanting to do things in a hurry. So I then left after 3 years because I'd seen the retail side, and I worked on the wholesale side because I wanted to see which of those two sides was the better. I had an idea that I might own some retail shops, but then working 3 years later on the wholesale side, I soon worked out that the wholesale side was always going to be a lot better. And that's eventually, when I was 28, I started my own business.
Fantastic. So all there just geared just because you played?
Basically, essentially, yeah. Yeah. And I think it just shows you're adaptable. And while you don't think about it at the time, some of those things do have a big imprint on the way you think and you make decisions later in life. You know that you can adapt and move forward. If your focus is the right way.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that. I think it's down to you as well. The fact that as a young man, you can even get that thought process going about planning and mapping out your future. Most men at the age of 21 just meander all over the place, Graham.
Well, funnily enough, after I'd left Farmers and I was working the wholesale side of things, I actually was driven, and this sounds really terrible, but I was driven to, I really wanted to do something really good, which was going to give me a good income and sustain me, but also wanted to be able to do something where I could involve a lot of people. It just something clicked like that. So I was always going to find a product to sell. I know that, and because I'd started off in this clothing business, that became the product that I built my business around. I remember starting with, I said to my wife, and we had 2 children at the time, and in those days you could live on $5,000 a year, like you could cover all your household costs. So I gave my wife $5,000 and said, please look after the household for a year. Then I just charged off and had a really, really good first year, because Anne could look after everything in the house. And then the second year we might have said it's $7,000, and the next year it might have been 10. So we always had those compartmentalised so that there was never any distraction from one to the other, and it allowed you to,
take a lot of stress away as well. That sounds, again, a lot of.
It sort of gets back to the planning. If I sort of look back on it, I think, I was probably, while it was very much number 8 wire stuff, there was probably some good planning. That while you didn't think about it like that, there was good planning there, a good methodology. So, yeah.
You mentioned your wife, right? She's suddenly been introduced. Now, where did you two meet?
Well, I met her at Farmers. What actually happened is she used to work there on a Friday night for, people go, you work on a Friday night, that was the late night, and you get $10, I think it was, for working between 5 and 9. And I remember seeing her across the floor and asking her out. The first time I asked her out, she said no, and because she was going to her sister's wedding. And then I thought, Anyway, the next week I rang, and she was going to because she was still at school in her last year of school. She was going to a school ball with somebody, and I thought, but she said, if you ring me next week, I'll. So I sort of knew there was a hint there. So that was it. And from then on, she was 17 or 18 when we met. So that's been great.
And when did you get married?
I would have been 23 and Anne was 19. So I just left the retail side of things, and I was working for a wholesaler, Benson Blenkiron, who used to make men's. They had a factory in Otahu making pants and shorts. Couple of thousand pairs a week. So I was working there, and that's in that year we got married. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And you've got 2 children, you're saying?
No, we've got 3 children who have all represented New Zealand at a particular sport. Lisa and Kirsten, the 2 girls, they represented New Zealand at rhythmic gymnastics and travelled the world when they were 12 to 17. And Andrew, he's 7 years younger than the eldest one, he went to the World Junior Triathlon Games in, I think, 2001 in Edmonton. So it's all a bit of a buzz that they've all done really well at, what they chose to do.
That's magnificent. You must be a proud dad. I've got 6 boys, and none of them have represented New Zealand at anything. But I'm still very proud of them, Graham. They've all achieved a lot in their careers. So can you think back to when you actually asked her to marry you, or did she ask you?
I can remember it was at a Pine Song we'd been for dinner. It was like a dinner dance place at Pine Song out at Tarangi. Yeah, I remember asking her if she'd marry me.
And she said yes this time straight away, rather than giving you the no and then the yes.
No, she said yes, and then we we weren't living together, and I was still living at home, and she was living at her place. She lived out at Tarangi, and I was living at Murringy Bay, so it's a long way away. So we got engaged, and we said to our respective parents that we weren't going to get married. We didn't want to get married for at least 18 months because our plan was to buy a house so that it was, pardon me, ready to move into. So what we did is we bought a house out in Browns Bay, and like most people, he had a first and a second mortgage, but we rented it out for 13 months, which paid off the second mortgage and had enough money to do it all up. So when we got married, we're all set to go, really, with one mortgage, and it was all good.
I wish I'd have met you about 50 years ago and you could have done some planning for me, Graham. I certainly could have used it. Now, where did you get your first involvement with bowls? When did you first come into contact with bowls?
A very good friend of mine, Tim Preston, was the CEO of ASB Securities, which was the stockbroking arm of ASB. And this would be about 14 years ago. And he was 47 and he got struck down with MS, multiple sclerosis. So he basically had to resign. The prognosis originally wasn't very good. So after about 6 or 9 months, I was down at the Dark Horse in Constellation Drive, backing a horse on a Friday afternoon, and Tim was in there. And this is a great story, I think. He was there, and I said, "What are you doing down here?" And he said, "Oh, I haven't got anything much to do, and I've been at home for 4 months, and I've cleaned out all Rhonda's computers, and I've done this, and I've cleaned up the house, but blah, blah, blah." He's pretty bored. So I remember saying to him, "Can you bend?" So we're at the bar, and he could bend okay. And I said, "Can you step out?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, why don't we join a bowling club?" And he said, "Well, I don't want to play bowls." Anyway, the short version was we'd had a few drinks. So we decided there were 3 bowling clubs close: Murringy Bay, Milford, and Takapuna. So the first number, I still remember it, 4107043. Rang Milford Bowling Club. It was Friday afternoon at 4:30, and this guy answered the phone, who happened to be the president, who happened to be in the club at that time. And I said, "Oh, there's 2 of us thinking about joining a bowling club. Is your membership open?" He said, Yeah. "Whereabouts are you?" And I told him that we're at the Dark Horse and we'd had a few drinks and we were heading home. And he said, "Well, look, why don't you call in on the way home and have a drink with us?" Which we did. So we walked in the door, and they have a sort of a social night on a Friday night. And this guy made us so welcome. So we signed up and joined. And the great thing about all that is Tim went on and won two or three junior centre titles in North Harbour and a senior centre title. So it's amazing.
That's not a bad effort, and suffering from MS as well.
Yeah.
But am I right in thinking that the pair of you won a junior pairs title, centre title?
We did. We won on the rink next door to us. Our wives won the junior centre pairs, and half an hour later, after about 20 minutes waiting for an umpire to measure the shot, we won the junior men's 15-14. I remember that pretty clearly. Yeah, that was a pretty special day.
How cool. So you two are playing and your wives are playing and you're both the same day.
Yeah, that's half an hour apart. Yeah.
Fantastic. I know the Dark Horse well. I live just on the other side of Sunset Road. So I know the boozer well. So basically, wasn't your father involved in bowls?
Your dad was he played at Murringy Bay, and he was the president there for 1 or 2 years back in the maybe late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, he was a very popular president down there. Yep. Right.
So you're at Milford, but then you move. Your association now is with Takapuna.
It is.
When did you first move over there?
Well, I was at Milford, or Tim, we were all at Milford, and then my wife, Anne, became a really good bowler. And I think to date she's won something like 12 or 13 centre titles and been placed in national events probably 2 or 3 times. So she became a very good bowler. She and Tim's wife joined a year after us. And at Milford at the time, they weren't very strong in the women's side of things, so it's quite difficult even to get a team to play in a centre event. And Anne was asked by one of the girls at Browns Bay, they were looking for a lead in the fours, if she'd like to go to Browns Bay and play in that team. And Anne's very competitive, and that was the right thing for her to do. So when she left, we sort of really all had to, and then we all went to Browns Bay for a couple of years, but we then shifted from Milford to Takapuna, and I was a joint member at Takapuna and Browns Bay, and I've sort of embraced Takapuna really in the last 5 years. Yeah.
Right now, what sort of got you into coaching?
Probably like most dads, when Andrew, my son, was like maybe 5 or 6, he started playing. It wasn't Ripper Rugby, it was like almost like Ripper Rugby. I coached that team with another guy, Jeff Coley, and that team, funnily enough, in that team, there was not a team of 10, and 8 of them, 32 years later, are still great mates. We've not been best men at each wedding and all that sort of stuff, all these kids. But it was a brilliant little team, and they played brilliant rugby for 2 or 3 years. I don't think they lost a game until the 3rd year. And then as they got into tackle rugby, I sort of graduated into that a wee bit more and went to a few coaching courses, and it was just one of those things. So I coached the teams that he was in for a while. And then in the mid 90s, I then got involved with North Harbour and coached the North Harbour under 16 team, and then the secondary school side, and then coached the age grade 21s, and stopped then, and then went back to Rangitoto and coached the first 15 there for a year. So that was sort of like I got heavily involved in the coaching side of things.
Right. So coaching for me, I see there's different skills that you need in different sports, but in terms of being able to manage individuals and get the best out of them, I was talking to Noreen Toldoa the other day, and I felt that she's a that could coach anything. So where did you start coaching bowls? Was it, you've coached rugby and you've done well at it? Well,
I did a coaching course when I was a 3rd-year bowler. Because I just wanted to get involved in coaching. Really, that was something I was a steady bowler, certainly not a great bowler by any means, but I just knew my bent was more in the coaching side of things, and I enjoy club administration, but I absolutely love the coaching. And I'd always thought, you have a bit of an idea, and I'd always thought, like with new bowlers, you should coach them. When they've been bowling 4 or 5 years, you should train them. And when they're really experienced bowlers, you should do neither of those two. You should manage them. So that's always been my philosophy. So I've always been able to sort of compartmentalise that sort of stuff the way I plan things, depending on who the people are. So that's sort of really where it's got to. So in each case, I might have started with juniors, which I enjoyed, because you're really coaching, more technique. The next group, you're training skills for various scenarios, and then when you've got top players, you're primarily managing them and helping them with the odd thing, but more it's about, for me, it's a huge thing is the culture in the team and the teamwork. Absolutely non-negotiable, to be honest.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. And what do you think? I mean, obviously there's different skills that you bring to those 3 different compartments that you've just outlined. When you get to the senior bowlers, the top level bowlers,
right.
How do you identify what motivates them and how to best, improve their game and improve their results?
Well, by spending a lot of time with the key people. I mean, you've got to have buy-in from the key people in your team, without question. If you haven't, it's always going to be going into a headwind uphill. But I without bragging, I think I'm a really good communicator, both orally and in written form. So people know well in advance what's going to happen. When we talk about work-ons and what things that is the big thing for them, we actually isolate those and spend time on doing those. A good example of that is the mental side of things. 5 or 6 years ago, we invested quite heavily and we have a session once a month with a guy, and that's been now going for 6 years, and that so probably 70 or 80 sessions, and a lot of those people have been to those and continue to go to those, and that's those sort of things. When you're together talking about that sort of stuff, the impact is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. once you get this total honesty in that environment. And that may take a year. It doesn't happen overnight. But when you get this in a group talking about that side of things, you become your best friend, where I've got your back, you've got my back. And that probably is the equal of being a technical coach, probably even more so at the top level.
Mental skills seems to be becoming more and more popular, more time being spent on it. How hard was it to get buy-in from different individuals, that mental skills? Was there a skepticism?
Okay, well, a very good example, the year that we introduced that, I was coaching the North Harbour men's 1 to 8 grade. In those days, it was a national grade for bowlers 8 years and under. So I was coaching that team, and within that team, we had Bevan Smith, who was an Olympic and Commonwealth Games sprinter, Greg Yelovich, who won 10 medals at the Commonwealth Games in shooting, and we had another person just in that 8. And these guys were really good bowlers, and everything was going well in terms of the way you'd normally coach a squad and a team. And when I spoke to them about this mental side of things, I wanted them to, I felt there was going to be some benefit. So we got this guy, Daniel Stamp, who was a lecturer at AUT and had come with good recommendations from John Quinn. So I invited him to the session. I said, there's going to be 8 men, we had a squad of 10. There's going to be 10 guys here. We're happy to engage with you if we get an affirmative reaction from this group of 10. So we're not paying you for day one. You come in, here's the topic. And the topic was pressure. I want you to run a session on pressure, which was actually 90 minutes. And at the end of it, Daniel left and said, how did that go? And I said, I'll let you know tomorrow. And as they walked out the door, I said to Bevan Smith, and these guys had come out of high performance, I said, how did you find that? And God's honour, he shook my hand and he said, Graham, that's exactly what we need. And I said to Greg Yelovich, what's your view? He said, that's exactly what we need. So that's what happened. And once you get buy-in from those, it was great. And Daniel used to he wanted a North Harbour shirt. He came to the trainings on the green as well, not just off green. So he became quite integrated. So that's sort of a formula that we've really continued to use.
Fantastic. I mean, Greg Yelovich, he'd know about pressure, wouldn't he? So
he's very seriously analytical, Greg. It was good, but in that format of bowls, it was definitely the right thing to do.
Now, what is it? I mean, you're a Takapuna person now. What is it about the Takapuna Club that you enjoy?
Well, I think we're unique. We have a seriously big roll-up area, which is 3 days a week, Monday afternoons, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday afternoons. We get between 30 and 50 people who come along and play one game, 10 or 12 ends, maybe 14 ends, have a cup of tea or a drink afterwards and go home. That's their thing. It's non-competitive. The person who's organising it just puts them in different groups, and that's very much a social part of the club. But that 40 to 50 people are huge. That's a massive part of the club. Then we've got a social membership who don't play any bowls, but they come along and maybe they might play Crackerjack Business House, where we have 25 teams. We have a big group of those. Then we've obviously got the competitive side, which is we're very strong in that area in both men and women. Then we've got some community involvement, and you put all that into the mix, we've actually got the essence of a club. I think it's just that we cover every option or every base. I mean, we had one of our teams playing at Pukekohe in the final of the Champs fours, and I think there was like 8 or 9 people travelled out to Pukekohe on the Sunday who were non-competitive bowlers just to support them. So I think we've generated this really good team culture. In fact, I know we have brilliant team culture at the club.
And it's in a magnificent part of the world. I park outside it, not in your parking space, but in the council ones when I go to this Indian restaurant around the corner. So I must pop my head in.
Yeah, big ticket. No, that's a nice place for a meal too.
It is a very nice place. We'll have to go there. We'll have to go there one day, Graham, and have a good old catch up.
Yeah, but you should pop into the club. Honestly, you'd really enjoy it. It's yeah.
I will do. Now you've Coach of the Year. Are you going to let other people have a little bit of a crack of it? Because I've looked at the record. 2017, you first in 18 and 19, and then you win it again last year. Are you bribing the judges, or are you that good?
I smiled. I saw Mark Cameron's comment because Graham Reese won it twice, and he said maybe you've got to be a Graham to win this thing. I thought that was. Yeah.
You must be. I mean, you don't strike me as someone who's out for that type of recognition, but it must be pleasing to see that your efforts, of the players that you mentor, have resulted in these awards.
Well, it is pleasing, but I mean, in the first year I won it was on the back of probably the 1-8 team, which won the national title twice, and that was, I mean, that's all credit to them. That was an outstanding squad of guys. So yeah, it's good.
And obviously, it's something that you've got a real passion for.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Whether it's, I mean, I still enjoy. We have a skills session at Takapuna on a Friday morning for not new bowlers, but maybe they've been bowling 3 years plus, and even up to the very experienced bowlers. And I still enjoy that part of it. It's great. Keeps you in touch with the technical side of the game. It's good.
Now, what we do at the end of this, Graham, is we just do a few simple questions, just like a sort of quick fire round of questions. Have you got a pet?
A pet? No.
Yeah. Have you ever had a pet, or are you just not a pet person?
No, I haven't had. Oh, maybe when I was living in Hamilton, we had a cat.
Yeah, well, we'll discount that because that's a long time ago now, Graham.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
You're not a pet person. That's not a problem. You've got too many other things going. What is your favourite sports team?
Probably the All Blacks.
Yeah, I think it's a question that we get that answer a lot in New Zealand.
I think they tick every box. I mean, not just the way they play. I think just everything from planning to finality. They go from A to Z pretty well.
Yeah, I think they've led the world for a long time and are still doing it despite the financial disadvantages compared to some other countries.
I'll tell you the other person I have a huge amount of respect for. Maybe it's another question. Is Gordon Walker in canoeing. I think what Gordon Walker has done in canoeing, to lift it to not an international level, but I mean it's world class what he does. I've got a lot of time for him, and I've read a lot of stuff to do with what he does. I think I'm a huge admirer of his.
And I'm sure you're gleaning bits of you from that. But what about your favourite sports person, the sports individual?
That's very hard. Probably Peter Snell.
Yeah, I mean that's you can't go better than that, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I think he was the catalyst for everything. I was in my teens and going to Western Springs and watching him when they had those track series. That he was like from another planet.
He is. It's so strong as well compared to a lot of more lean, wiry runners. He was an absolute beast of an athlete. Yeah, a physical specimen. What about music? Is there anyone that, alive or dead, that you'd love to go to a concert to see?
Probably not. I enjoy music, but I'm not absolutely passionate about it to the extent of that.
That's fair enough. We're not forcing you to go. What about the movies, or have you not got time for them either?
Oh no, I like movies. Yeah, I do.
Right. What's your favourite?
Probably the one I've seen the most is The Shawshank Redemption. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's a cracking movie. Yes. And finally, and we're not wishing this on you at all, Graham, but if you should end up on death row, what would your last meal be?
Probably fish pie.
Oh,
Anne's fish pie. That'll be pretty cool.
Oh, you've got to say that. It can't be someone else's. It's got to be Anne's, or else you get into trouble. And would you have anything to drink with it?
Definitely a Craggy Range Reserve Chardonnay.
Oh, yeah, I'll be joining you for that one.
Probably with a little block of ice on it.
Oh, a little block of ice in it. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's put ice in it.
Yeah, a little block. No, it's nice. Just keeps the chill.
Yeah, fair enough too. Well, Graham Dorreen, thank you so much for your. I'm sure there's many people out there who think very fondly of you, as you do back to your initial cricket coach at school, because you've helped them grow in terms of bowls, but I'm sure as well grow in terms of being as a human being. So thank you very much for your time. We wish you all the best in the future, and who knows, Coach of the Year 2022 could be you.
Thank you very much for the interview. No, it's great.
They were rampaging along, won their first 2 games. They've lost their last 2, but they could have probably won both of them. fantastic looking facility there in the deep south.
I'm sure they're going to come out firing tonight.
From memory, he was leading last week. Are you going to be leading this week, or?
From bottom with 6 points and second from bottom with 5. Yes and no.
Yes and
No.
It paid off for them. They got a 2, double a 4 and won 6 points.
Depends what the teams above you do, doesn't it?
Unbiased, Miles Davis.